It's nice to be out here. So, by the way, I'm Benita, known as the Fiber Pusher, and I want to talk today about linen. Now, I'm going to be doing a dye series this year, and it's all natural dyes, which is one of the reasons why I'm growing all the natural dye plants, which you'll see in other videos. And I'm going to be dyeing 4 different kinds of material. 2 cellulose, cotton and linen, and 2 protein, wool and silk. So let's talk about linen. One of the reasons why I want to talk about linen first is linen has been used by man far longer than any of the other fibers. They found in the Republic of Georgia, and that's in Asia, not in Georgia, the United States, they found evidence of flax and linen use as far back as 34,000 BC. Now you got to think about how long ago that is. That's 36,000 years ago. They actually found evidence that people had been using flax and linen for textiles. Also things like nets and all that kind of thing. Also, even, everybody's heard of the Lascaux caves in France. 18,000 years ago, they found, again, evidence of flax being used. Like I said, far, far longer than even wool. I mean, sheep hadn't even been domesticated by that point. So linen and bast plants have been used for a very long time. Now, what's interesting about them, how they came up with the ability to turn this plant into usable fiber, because it's not easy. For one thing, okay, flax is a plant that grows really straight and really tall, and the fibers are the entire length of the plant. So, I mean, it even goes down into the roots. And so you have to dry the plant, take the seed heads off, which is called rippling. You have to ret it, which is to rot it enough that it takes the outer bark and kind of rots it off and everything. You have to break it, which is basically beating it and getting that outer bark off. And then you have to scotch it, which is taking this wooden knife thingy to help scrape off that woody outer bark. And then you have to hackle it, which is combing it through metal kind of nails on a board, basically. And you comb it through it into ever finer until you get down to something that you can spin. Now, honest with you, how in heaven's name did someone come up with this? How did someone discover? Well, okay, I can understand if they saw the plant after it had been grown and they saw it rotting and they saw the fibers in it, but people think that prehistoric man was dumb. Cavemen, that kind of thing. I'm sorry. They were far from stupid. They created things from no experience on this stuff at all. People say, oh, we can grow linen. Oh, yeah, we can grow linen, but this was wild flax. This was nothing domesticated like we have today. They had to discover it, and this was long before there were farmers and agriculture. This is still back in the hunter-gathering era. So, linen, of course, it's been used forever. During most of the Middle Ages in Europe, the only fibers that they had was linen and wool. Silk came along a little later, but it was for the wealthy. Cotton came along a little later, and at the beginning that too was only for the wealthy. Now the thing is, linen can take dye, which is one of the reasons why I'm using it in the natural dye series this year, not as well as wool. And that's why most of the time when you see paintings or whatever and someone has linen on, it's either white or the natural colored linen, not necessarily dyed. You can dye it. It is more difficult. But with wool taking dye so much easier, well, no wonder they didn't bother dyeing the linen all that much, and they stuck with just the white linen. Now, linen obviously has a lot of properties that makes it such a wonderful plant. One thing, it's stronger wet than dry, so ship sails were made out of it. Also, unlike cotton, which when it absorbs moisture feels damp and clammy. Linen doesn't. When it absorbs moisture, it stays cool. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to wear in the summertime, which is why a lot of people do wear linen in the summertime and don't necessarily wear it in the winter because it feels nice and cool. So, of course, people use it for clothing, bedding. Matter of fact, they said it took a 1/4 acre of flax to make enough material for the bedding and clothing for one man for 1 year. Or woman, one person. That's a lot. And if you think about it, when you've got, okay, let's just say you have 100 people in your village. It's going to be 25 acres of flax to give them the bedding and the clothing that they need for 1 year. And I apologize for shaking. So, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, if you take a sheep, for instance, okay, linen does last longer. It is stronger wet than dry, but it also has a brittle side, which I'll talk about in a second. Wool, on the other hand, it's so much easier to grow sheep and raise sheep. And also sheep will produce that fleece year after year after year. So you're using the same amount of resources, the same amount of ground, and it just reproduces it every year and everything from the one sheep. And then when you're done, you can eat the sheep. Not to mention you can eat the male lambs and everything. So linen was time-consuming. It strips the soil of nutrients, and so they had to either definitely do rotational farming and stuff like that with it. And they also had to practice, just the practice of creating fabric from it. That would have not been easy to do. It was a time-consuming thing. There's a whole industry with linen. And the fun thing with linen is, linen back in the Egyptian times was spun and woven so fine that machines today can't replicate it. The same thing with cotton. It was amazing. But linen to me is such a fun fiber. I enjoy spinning it. It's easy to spin because it's a big, huge, long fiber. You don't have to worry about it breaking. But with spinning it and weaving it, you do it wet. Again, linen is stronger wet than dry. So when you spin it, you actually are dipping your fingers in water, and that gives you that nice, smooth thread. When you're weaving it, you have your bobbins that's soaked in everything, and you spritz your warp. That keeps your warp threads from breaking while you're weaving. It's a very stiff fabric when it first comes out. If you see white linen, that's been bleached. Today, natural linen, it depends on how it's retted. There's two ways, and it has to be retted underwater or with water. There's dew retting, which basically means you lay it out in the field, and you have to turn it every once in a while, but you got to have heavy dews or rain. Got to be careful not to over-ret it. If you under-ret it, it's always easy to ret more, but once you've got it over-retted, you've ruined the fiber. So there's definitely a timing thing, and people who know what they're doing this. So, and then water-retted is where they put it in ponds or a lake or stream with water running over it. Now, there was some problems with the ecological part of doing that, is because the gunk coming out of the linen as it's rotting or retting actually is poisonous, and it actually would poison streams, kill off all the fish. Anybody who was downstream of it, drinking the water, animals as well as people, would be poisoned. So there was a huge controversy, even back in the Middle Ages, of doing your retting and stuff like that in a stream. They actually did have specific ponds and everything that they created to do the retting, but dew retting was a lot easier on the ecology, I should say. The thing is you get two different colors too. Something that has been dew-retted is more toward the grays, and there's something that has been water-retted is more blonde, which is the reason why people wanted to water-ret it. It was a lighter colored. You've heard the color flaxen. That's what color it was. Whereas dew-retted is a darker, grayer, part of a more, I don't know. I'll show you when I do the scouring, I actually have some linen yarn that has not been bleached. Now, you can bleach linen yarn with bleach, or you can sun bleach it. And most of the time in the Middle Ages, they would just lay the big pieces of fabric out in the sun and let the sun do the job. You could tell the people who were lower down on the social scale, the linen that they wore tended to not be as white as the people in the higher social skills. Now, another thing with linen, and this is with cotton too, but mostly linen because they're bast fibers. And bast means long fiber that's, grown through the whole thing of the plant, is they can be brittle. You think something that's so strong wet could be brittle, but it is. And it's brittle in the fact that you've got the one long fiber, and if you bend it too many times, if you bend something too many times, it's going to break. And that's the same thing with linen and hemp and jute and all of them, is if it gets bent and folded too many times, it can break. So machine washing linen actually is hard on it. So what they've always done is they've boiled it. Now, I've boiled linen. In fact, you talked about the boiled linen shirt. Well, that's basically where it comes from. I've boiled it, and with the scouring process, which I will show you in another video, and it can make the linen softer while it's boiling, but I could see why people liked it. It's a very stiff fabric. Obviously, the more you wear it and the more it gets washed and everything, the softer it becomes. But what I've got right now is fabric and thread that's really stiff. So it's been interesting doing the scouring and everything, and I can't wait to show you guys that video. But, it's funny because linen kind of went away for a while. I mean, it became from being the material that everybody wore to something that became a luxury good because cotton overtook that. And the prevalence of cotton, the ease of growth of cotton, the ease of processing and turning cotton into a fabric made cotton way more popular, and it was the downfall of linen, which is sad because I do like linen. I do like the fact that hemp is coming back, which is a bast fiber just like the linen is. But yeah, linen had a very interesting history. It's been around for so long, but yet it's probably one of the least fibers that we use today. We definitely wear way more cotton. We wear more wool. We wear more silk than we do linen. And but linens, I do want to do the natural dyeing with it. I mean, I want to do 2 cellulose and 2 proteins. I want to see how well the linen takes dye. I do know that it has to be mortared for a longer time. And that's just the structure of the linen fiber itself. The way it just doesn't want to absorb the water. It doesn't want to absorb the dyes. So it's going to take longer to morton. It's going to take longer to absorb the mortons and absorb the dyes. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm going to be really interested because I have never done natural dyes with linen. I have done synthetic dyes with linen. I've never dyed linen. So this is going to be a good experiment for us for this year. So anyways, I wanted to talk to you about that. Now, stay tuned because the whole adage about that I just told you about linen is stronger wet than dry? I'm going to test that out. Let's find out if that's true. So hang on. Let's go do the experiment. So I guess you're kind of wondering why I'm out here. Well, I've always heard that linen is stronger wet than dry. And I kind of want to test it. So what I have here, 2 empty milk jugs. This is a dry line. This line's been soaking for hours, so it's wet. Let's find out which one lasts the longest. Now how I'm going to do this is I've pre-measured the water. This is dry. This is how much water is in this gallon at the beginning, which is 3.802 kilograms. And then this one here is for the wet, which is 3.768 kilograms. It's close, but I want to be able to measure how many kilograms is left in these two jugs once the thread breaks. So let's give this a try. I'm going to start with the wet. I'm sorry, starting with the dry. All I'm doing is holding it from spinning around so I can actually pour into it. Ha! Okay, I have what's remaining in this one. So we'll measure it. Wow, as much as that took, I have a feeling this may take the whole gallon. So again, that was the dry one. Now let's see how much water we can put in the wet thread. Wow, it's held the entire time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go weigh this real quick, and then I'm going to pour the rest of this in here so I know how much is left over. But I'm also going to get some more water. And I think what I'm going to do is attach another empty jug to this one and continue filling both jugs until it breaks. So hang on. Okay, I'm going to continue filling this up. I put 3.462 kilograms in here. So obviously it's held the first one, and now let's try for this one. So all right. Wow. I'm going to come around to fill. Get back here. Ha! Now we get to do some measuring. Cool. So here are our results. The dry thread, the water started out in the gallon, 3.802 kilograms. It had 422 grams left. So when it broke, it had 3.38 kilograms of water in the jug. Now on the second one, the full one was 3.768. And then when the second one broke, it had 1,628 left in there. So, I mean, it had 2104 left in there. So the difference is 1628. So when it broke, it was holding 5.396 kilogram, which is 62.64% more weight. That's quite a difference between the wet and the dry. The wet actually was able to hold almost 63% more weight than the dry thread. Well, so that whole adage of linen being stronger wet than dry, even with a little bitty thread, I think it's a 2-ply thread, that works. So we've proved them right. So while we've done our experiment on which is stronger, wet linen or dry linen, obviously wet linen is far more stronger. But you know, that was an interesting experiment. And with that in mind, as I'm doing the natural dye series, and as I'm working with all these natural fibers, I am going to be doing more experiments with them. There's so many things that people tell us about, but I want to find out if there really, really are. So, yeah, we found out that linen is really stronger wet than dry, a lot stronger wet than dry. So, yeah, I enjoyed that. So anyways, I'm glad you joined me for my little episode about linen. And join me later as I do one on cotton, one on wool, one on silk, and also how to scour them and mortar them and dye with them with natural dyes. So I hope you enjoy the series that I'm doing. I'm still new at this with the smaller segments, but I hope you really enjoy it, and I hope it's something you want to join along with me. So you guys have a fantastic time. and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
The sponsor of this video is dyedinthewool.biz. If you're looking for breed-specific fibers, breed-specific yarns, breed study worksheets, posters, and a whole lot more, please visit us at www.dyedinthewool.biz.